Nobody sat you down and explained how money actually works. Not your parents, not your school, not your job, and that's not an accident. The rules I'm about to show you, the real ones, are the ones wealthy people learned early. At kitchen tables, in boardrooms, in conversations that were never recorded. And the ones that nobody in your circle ever taught you. We're fixing that today. 7 money rules poor people don't know exist. Here's what I want you to understand before we get into this. Being poor is not about income. It's about the rules you're playing by. And most of you are playing by the wrong rules. Not because you're not smart enough, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because you were never given the right ones. You weren't taught this. That is not a personal failure. But staying ignorant of it now, after this video, that becomes a choice. Seven rules. Each one a structural shift in how you see money. I'm going to give you all 7. But I want you to stay with me for the last one, because Rule 7 isn't a tactic. It isn't a strategy. It's the philosophy that makes all the other rules make sense. Let's start at the beginning. Rule 1. Never sell time. Always sell outcomes. Here's the trap most people never see. Every job is a transaction. You show up. You trade hours. And the person on the other side of that transaction decides what those hours are worth. You don't set the price. They do. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the most comprehensive household wealth study in the United States, found that the top income quartile earns a growing share of its money, not from wages at all, but from business ownership, capital gains, and investment returns. Not because they are paid more per hour, because they stopped selling hours entirely. A consultant who charges $10,000 for a project that takes 5 hours isn't selling 5 hours. They are selling the result of a decade of expertise applied to your specific problem. The client isn't buying time. The client is buying the outcome of time already invested. Every wealthy person I've studied made one internal shift before the money changed. They stopped asking, "How much will they pay me per hour?" and started asking, "What result am I delivering, and what is that result worth to them?" That one question is the gate between a salary and a dynasty. Rule 2. Use other people's money before your own. This is the one that genuinely separates how the wealthy move from how everyone else does. Poor people are taught that debt is bad. Wealthy people are taught something more precise, that bad debt is bad, and that good debt is a weapon. The difference between those two sentences is generational wealth. J.P. Morgan Asset Management's Guide to the Markets notes that real estate investors routinely control assets 4 to 5 times their equity through standard mortgage leverage. Private equity firms, the ones managing the wealthiest institutional capital in the world, regularly structure acquisitions using 60 to 70% debt. This is not aggressive. This is not unusual. This is standard operating procedure for anyone who understands that capital is a tool, and like any tool, you can rent it. The poor man waits until he has enough of his own money. The wealthy man moves before he does. The question was never, do I have enough to invest? The question was always, do I understand how to use capital that isn't mine yet? Rule 3 is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Rule 3. Tax is optional at the top. Not illegal, not dishonest. Optional. The tax code is written in 2 languages. One is for wage earners. W-2 income taxed at ordinary rates, limited deductions, automatic withholding. You never see the money before it's gone. The other language is for business owners and investors. Capital gains rates, depreciation, cost segregation, carried interest, entity structuring. These aren't loopholes. They are not tricks. They are the code working exactly as written for the people who understood how to use it. In 2021, ProPublica published an analysis of IRS data covering the 25 wealthiest Americans. Their finding: these individuals paid an average true tax rate of approximately 3.4% on their wealth growth between 2014 and 2018. Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people alive, has said publicly he pays a lower effective rate than his own secretary. He isn't bragging, he's describing a structure. You pay your taxes because you have to. They structure their taxes because they know how. That gap between have to and know how is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime, possibly millions. And nobody taught you the second option existed. Rule 4, and I want you to hear this one differently. Your network is your net worth, literally, not metaphorically, not as a phrase someone stitched on a motivational poster. I mean the word literally in its most precise sense. And I'm going to show you the data that proves it. Harvard economist Raj Chetty, whose Opportunity Insights lab studied 72 million Americans, published a landmark finding in the journal Nature in 2022. His conclusion, the single strongest predictor of upward economic mobility for low-income Americans was cross-class social exposure. Specifically, consistent social contact between lower-income and higher-income people. Not school quality, not neighborhood, not family structure, who you are around. I want you to imagine a scene. Two people are having a quiet conversation over coffee. One mentions, almost in passing, that a building just came to market off listing. Price is right. Terms are favorable. He's got 2 other investors he's calling today. That deal never gets listed publicly. The people at that table are the deal. Now, are you at that table? Most people aren't. Not because they couldn't afford it. Not because they weren't qualified, but because they were never in the room. Here's the hard truth about professional networks. They tend to be economically sealed. If everyone you know earns within $20,000 of what you earn, your information environment is a closed loop. The pre-IPO opportunity, the off-market property, the fund that isn't yet taking public applications, none of it reaches you. Not because you were excluded, because you were not present. The best investments I have ever seen were not found on a website. They were whispered between 2 people who trusted each other. If you're not in those conversations, you're not just missing deals. You're missing an entirely different map of how money moves. Rule 5, assets first, lifestyle second, always. Every time your income goes up, you stand at a fork. One path, the nicer apartment first, the new car, the upgrade, the reward you feel like you've earned. The other path, the asset first, the investment first, the position first. The lifestyle upgrade comes later, funded by income the asset generates, not by the raise itself. Only one of those paths builds a dynasty, and the fork comes every single time you get a raise. Thomas Stanley spent years studying over 1,000 first-generation millionaires, people who built wealth from scratch, not inheritance. His research, documented in The Millionaire Next Door, found a consistent behavioral pattern across every single one of them. They drove ordinary cars. They lived in houses below what they could technically afford. They allocated the gap between what they could spend and what they actually spent into compounding assets year after year. The visual identity of wealth most people carry in their heads is statistically backwards. The rule is not spend less. It is buy the asset before you buy the upgrade, every single time. Think about that. Which of these rules did someone in your life know that nobody ever told you? I'd genuinely like to know. Put it in the comments. Rule 6. Information asymmetry is the real edge. The wealthy don't just have more money, they know things first. I want to show you something most YouTube channels won't cover, because most creators don't know it exists. Under the SEC's Regulation D framework, the most profitable private investment vehicles, private equity, venture capital, pre-IPO deal access, private credit, are legally restricted to accredited investors. That threshold, a net worth above $1 million, excluding your primary home, or an annual income above $200,000. The SEC describes this as investor protection, shielding people from risky investments they may not fully understand. The practical effect? The best performing investment markets in the world are legally gated behind a wealth floor. You don't get access to the best deals until you already have money, and you can't build money fast enough without access to the best deals. Read that again if you need to. But the formal accreditation framework is only the visible layer of Rule 6. Information asymmetry operates at every level, at every scale. The business owner who knows a competitor is struggling before it's public. The investor who understands a zoning change before the neighborhood does. The operator who sees a supply chain shift before it hits the news cycle. Or by the time something is on CNBC, the smart money is already out. By the time it's on Reddit, the smart money bought 3 years ago. The rule isn't invest early. The rule is get into the rooms where early information lives. That's a relationship problem, not a research problem. Rule 7. Build systems, not income streams. I want to be careful here, because this is the rule most easily misunderstood. When most people say passive income, what they mean is another thing that requires them. Another side hustle, another channel, another freelance account, another job wearing different clothes. That is not a system. That is an income stream. And an income stream hits the same ceiling as a job, your time. Here's the test. It is simple. If you stopped showing up for 30 days, would the money still come? If the answer is no, you have a job with extra steps. That's fine. But call it what it is. Don't mistake a treadmill for a dynasty. If the answer is yes, you have the beginning of a system, and a system compounds. Michael Gerber wrote about this in the E-Myth Revisited. John Warrillow built on it in Built to Sell. The argument is the same. Most people who believe they own a business actually own a job. They are the engine. And when they stop, the engine stops. A system is something else. A system runs without you, scales without you. In its fullest form, sells without you. It generates multiple income streams, not because the owner added more streams, but because the architecture produces them. Every dollar spent building a system is worth 10 times what you would earn trading that same time for wages. Rich people don't work harder than you. They've built things that work without them. That is not passive income. That is a fundamentally different philosophy about what your time is for. Your time is not for producing. Your time is for building the machine that produces. 7 rules, all of them hiding in plain sight. Not in a vault, not in a private club, not in a family trust document you were never handed. Hiding in the way wealthy people talk about money when they think nobody is listening. In the questions they ask. In the structures they build quietly. In the moves they make before the market catches up. Nobody sat you down and taught you these. That was the first thing I said to you in this video. That was true then. It isn't anymore. If these 7 rules changed how you see the game, the Fortress Wealth series goes deeper on every single one. Stay tuned.